Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by three Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for Coffee and Conversation. Welcome back. Today we are thrilled to welcome psychotherapist Jane Parker to the bright side. Jane sees herself as a perspective shifter and resource builder for her clients, helping them notice their own strengths and expand their understanding of ways to navigate their world. Jane has been in private practice since 2005 and currently serves clients in Florida and South Carolina. We've invited Jane to join us today to help support our listeners in navigating challenging times.
Well, Jane, welcome. Despite all of that very impressive resume we just heard, we kind of know you as mom, really, because not everyone knows, but you have two wonderful daughters, Emily and Jessica, who worked with us for many years, Emily in particular, and your husband, Kevin. He's a colleague of ours in senior living, and so we've known the whole family for quite a while. So this is really a treat. And you came to mind right away as we were trying to get through this period and try to record some things that might help people get through this absolutely unprecedented crisis that we're all feeling. In particular, the very personal reactions that we're all getting from isolation, from disruption of our routine. Those out there, the healthcare workers who are really, I think, in a PTSD situation, first responders, but most of all, the majority of people just have had their lives disrupted, and so we wanted to, with our podcast, to bring them some help, some understanding, some practical tips. And also to maybe allay their fears that maybe they're going crazy. And so that's we thought of you immediately, Jane. So again, we thank you for being here.
Jane, how do you see people coping in general during these times, which are unprecedented for all of us?
Well, there's actually been an upside to this. So, for instance, some of my introverted clients are so excited that there's no social pressure to do anything. Mm-hmm. So it's been good for them. Some of the families have told me, ones with younger children, that they're less rushed. Their mornings are easier going. Some people who own their own business are not, some are really suffering. But some are also taking the time to go online and learn how to do that. This is my first podcast, so I'm learning something new and taking the time. The creativity has been unbelievable, how people are adapting. People are using the mail because the mail works. Send real notes to people. One of my college-age students is doing better in her coursework. She's less anxious, not being on campus and dealing with the different things on campus. So for some, it's working. But then there's a downside, of course. And sometimes it's a combination. But I do want to say to everyone that if you're feeling maybe even guilty about, hey, some of this is working, think about, how can I keep some of that for when things get back to normal? How can I, if I've realized I'm too rushed, can I change my schedule when the hamster wheel starts up again? So I'm really trying to get people to focus on, well, what is it I can keep that's working? But the downside too is that the minute our choices are diminished, it feels very heavy. And even though I might not have gone to the library every week, the fact that I can't go becomes heavy.
Yes.
Same with whatever is your distraction. Movies, the gym, restaurants. The fact that those choices are taken away is a problem. And it occurred to me that sometimes is what aging feels like. Choices are diminished. And this is where we have to get creative. So less distraction can feel good, but it can also cause others to feel like their life is narrowing. So what I suggest for some is think of variety. How can I get variety into my life, into my day? And if we think about a good day, at the end of the day, I'm not talking about a day where a special day where you were married or your child was born. I'm thinking about regular days. The end of the day, when you feel satisfied, what's happened? Probably for most people, I know for me, is that I've done a variety of things. I've talked to a friend. I've got a chore done. I've done some work. I've done something fun. So I encourage people to get creative about making sure their day has variety in it. We're going to talk, I hope, a couple of things. But Deb Dana is somebody I'm going to use some of her work. She talks about glimmers, to look for glimmers in a day. And glimmers are those sparks of joy, those what gives you a smile. So I've put that out there, and you spoke of my daughters, and they're sharing, what was your glimmer today? Mm-hmm. Did someone smile at you? Was there a great sunset? Any of those small things. And tracking glimmers is one way to start to add variety. Music, too. Again, Deb Dana talks about doing a music inventory. So take a moment and think, okay, how do I listen to music? What are the sources? What kind do I like? Have I been listening to it? Have I been dancing to it? Have I been doing sing-along songs with my kids? Have I missed music? Can I add it in? And then I shared some of my favorites with my clients. So that's another thing to do. Share it with a friend. Hey, I came across, especially those flash mobs. I love those musical flash mobs. They're so inspiring. And everyone has different tastes, but they're pretty exciting.
I think we see in people, you were saying about being mindful of your day and rethinking things that previously we didn't think because we were just all on automatic. So excellent advice.
Now, I don't want to take us too far to the downside because I really like all the positive things you've been sharing. I love the glimmers and the sharing music, but I am curious, knowing people who have, say, depression or anxiety or PTSD, how are they doing from what you've observed? Because I would imagine that whatever they're feeling has got to be compounded with what's happening.
Absolutely. So if you're prone to anxiety or depression, this can be magnified. If your worldview is that the world is a dangerous place, oh boy, do we feel it right now. So one thing to look at is how you feel physically. Where are you feeling the anxiety? Even separating it, does it feel like dread? Does it feel like worry? Does it feel like a vibration? And then noticing how that goes up to your brain and the story you start to tell yourself. So there's this wonderful nerve called the vagus nerve that goes from the brain, and it's the longest nerve. It goes all the way through your torso, and it's picking up information all the time, sort of from what we call our downstairs brain, the intuitive part, the instinctual part, the part that's stored a lot of memories of being upset or afraid. And it goes up to your brain, and then your brain interprets it. And that's where we get in trouble.
I know my brain gets me in trouble.
We've noticed that.
Sometimes it can be things that we're observing or words we hear that trigger, but they send down that message down to and we feel uncomfortable in our belly. So one memory that's come back to me is being under quarantine. You can tell I'm old because one time my sister got scarlet fever. That was a thing then. And the whole family was quarantined. Now, I don't remember being afraid, but I do remember I couldn't go to my friend's birthday party. And I wasn't even sick. So I was really mad. So those words, those feelings of choices being taken away have a physical reaction in me and can augment what's happening. So I have to separate that and stay in the present time zone. We can really let the past time zone kind of pollute the present. So the story I could be telling myself is that quarantine's a really bad thing. It keeps you from doing fun stuff. Well, not today. Today I can do a lot of fun stuff. Yeah, as a 8-year-old, that was the major crisis of my life. So that happens with people that have been traumatized and have PTSD. They have sensations, whether it's down in their belly of dread and anxiety or things they're hearing that remind them and then start to trigger the same thing. And somebody once said, it's like we have these video replays in our head of trauma and we push the play button really easily. And sometimes the play button is very sensitive and it doesn't take much. A smell, and we're pushing the play button of anxiety or something we've lived through before. But we can say, okay, wait a minute. What's different about today's context? Am I in the same place where that happened? Do I have more resources? Do I have choices that I'm not even thinking about? And we can send messages back down to say, calm down, relax. This vagus nerve touches every organ, our heart and lungs. And even if we're starting to race and get into that fight or flight kind of place, which is not the vagus nerve doing that, it's the other nerves. But feedback from the vagus nerve can say, it's okay.
So what I hear you saying that to some extent, well, probably more than just some extent, we can be our own therapist. We can be our own enemy. We can be making the situation, no matter what it is, objectively, a whole lot worse with our thoughts, and we can make them a whole lot better with our thoughts. Is that correct?
Yes. Thoughts and paying attention to the physical. I think that's something that's coming out a lot in psychology now, is that the physical is connected. So any of those breathing exercises, because as we breathe in, things race up a little bit. As we breathe out, things calm down slightly. You can feel the difference. So don't hold your breath. Let it out. Movement. Movement's really important because we build up anxiety and we kind of have tremors almost, trying to contain our fear, but just let it out, shake it off. So paying attention to the physical, noticing how we feel in the pit of our torso is really important. Then I would check the story you're telling yourself, and then say, is it accurate? That's one question. And is it helpful? It might be accurate, but is it helpful? It might not be helpful to be all wound up and predicting everything that could go wrong. I think what people are finding is no one imagined how bad this could be, yet everyone's coping. People, for the most part. I know there's countries that are worse off. I know that there's people who have lost their job. And what's very tricky is we usually turn to others to help us at times like this. And that's hard right now. So, but people are reaching deep down and finding how creative they can be to cope with this. And it's pretty exciting. So one of my favorite lines to give to clients is, what else is true? Yep, we could get the flu. Lots of things are happening. But what else is true? Oh my gosh, spring is still coming, despite it. People are doing video Zoom meetings. Last night we had a birthday party for my 3-year-old granddaughter. And people from all over North America were there. Wow. It was so cool.
I can only imagine what it would be like without social media, without the internet, without cell phones, which, for a long time in our past we didn't have. So it was immediately those around us, but not being able to be with those around us. So Teresa and Danielle know very well that although I appreciate technology, a lot of times I look at the dark side of it. Well, I'm not seeing too much of that these days. This is a very, very, very positive contributor to our mental and overall physical health.
Jane, I think we're all in a new time, and we're all trying to figure out what's normal. And I almost asked that with air quotes, like, what's normal? What should we be experiencing? What's normal to be experiencing right now, would you say?
It's normal to realize that you have to plan, that you have to think about food, that you have to think about where you're going. It's also normal to be worried that, for instance, I'm thinking if I got a regular sinus infection, I'm now going to be hesitant to go to the doctor and bother them with that. So we're kind of planning for that. And that changes how we think about our day and our world. So to be concerned and to want to plan differently is normal. But then in some ways, we're expected to do less. I think that's a big thing. It's the expectations of what we're supposed to accomplish in a day is taken away. And even the type A personalities are going, just is what it is. And they can't believe those words came out of their mouth. So that's normal. But if you find yourself crying all the time, not even wanting to connect via technology, you may be in a place of shutdown where it's just so overwhelming and that you want to hide. Think about reaching out to your doctor. Maybe you need a change in medication. That's happening a lot if you're already on something. Or maybe you need something temporarily. Reaching out, almost every therapist I know is doing telehealth. And that's really important. And the insurance companies are stepping up to cover it. And it's working. People think it might not be effective, but it's very effective.
So it's normal for people to have to plan and look at things differently. And maybe it's normal to feel a little bit of anxiety because, we're all experiencing something that's scary. But you're saying the time to say, look for help is when people find themselves completely isolated, completely out of energy. What are the behaviors where somebody should say, I really need to talk to somebody?
It's interesting you should say that, because we used to say you're depressed if you don't want to get dressed in the day, but lots of people aren't getting dressed anymore. So that's not a criteria. But yes, not having energy, not wanting to make an effort to try something new or to phone someone or connect with someone. If we go back to this vagus nerve, it comes out of our brain and it's connected to all the nerves that are around our face. What animates our face, what animates our voice. So when we're feeling safe, we are geared to listening to other people. We want to read their faces. So getting voices and faces in front of us is really important. We want to see that. We can self-regulate. We can help that vagus nerve send down good messages if we can see faces. And this is not working. People who have very blank faces or are wearing a mask, that's unnerving because we can't regulate. We can't read them and then feel safe. The same with sound. And that's why music is so important, is because when the vagus nerve is humming along as it should, it's interacting with the parts that deal with our hearing, which lets us hear in that decibel zone for human voice. And Disney knows exactly what to do about this. All their music is in that happy place. But if we're feeling stressed, we can't even hear that. We're then geared to hear loud roaring, very low, or high screeching of pain, because we know that when someone is trying to, this is kind of getting a little off, but if someone's trying to apologize to us, but we're so angry that we're not in that safe place, we can't hear them. I can't hear you. I'm so mad. So someone might be apologizing, but we're not receiving it. So that's why music can bring you back to that safe place. But if we don't feel like doing any of that, we don't want to talk to anyone or see anyone's face, that's a sign that we're really having a tough time. If we're crying, if we're having a lot of flashbacks, if we're not eating, people are finding that, they're going through the day and not eating because they're not having the normal schedule. I have to eat before I go to work, or I go to my lunchroom to eat. There's not the markers for that. So that usually means people are not in tune with, I'm hungry. They're kind of in shutdown. And shutdown's a real thing. So we've got 3 levels. We've got social engagement where we're feeling safe. We've got that fight or flight place, but then we've got a shutdown place where we just give up. And that's kind of what the animal world does when they're really, really scared. They'll play dead, and then they can't sense anything because they don't want to feel any pain. Because if they felt pain and someone bit them, then they'd move.
It's fascinating because, it's clear we all react differently. And I think what you're doing is reassuring us as that, we can experience almost anything at this particular time. But I think there's an admonition on your part to be careful with sort of what we call a chattering mind, or just a monkey mind, or something that just, especially that's bringing us to the dark side. But otherwise, I think that you're telling us that, to some extent, it can be difficult, that we are in charge of how we're going to perceive this time when everything has changed. That it's almost like when someone, you've heard the term, how to be happy, you choose happiness. Well, we almost choose how we are going to be during this time. You can't modify the conditions, but you can really choose how you feel about it and how you respond to it. Is that not true?
I don't want to put pressure on someone that if they're having trouble being happy, it's because they're not choosing correctly. But entertain the idea that something else could be true. entertain the idea that I could add some variety to my day, or I could have a goal of connecting with one person. And if you start with text, that's great. Just know how important it is to connect.
Jane, some people, you spoke about not eating, and it made me think of the opposite. Like some people have related COVID-19 to the freshman 15. For the same reasons, maybe we don't have those prompts to eat when we normally do. So there's like breakfast, snack, snack after that snack kind of eating. And I think, and maybe it's a buffering thing. Maybe for one person it's eating, for another person it's drinking, like our go-to escape button, so to speak. So do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, let's apply the same idea of variety. And I don't mean how many different programs on Netflix. Netflix is one thing. So if you think, okay, I need variety because all I'm doing is sitting around eating or drinking or whatever, take a walk, don't deny, but what else can I add to my day? I'm becoming one-dimensional. I think that's a kinder way of looking at it instead of, oh my gosh, I better start eating lettuce.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to play games with yourself. I've done it myself. Okay, I can have that cinnamon bun and cup of coffee if I go for a walk first. So you can beat yourself up and say you're not disciplined, but I'm just going to add variety to my day and make sure there's movement in it.
Okay, so I've been dying to hear more since you said the word glimmer. Can you talk more about what those glimmers are?
The vagus theories I'm talking about, they're called the polyvagal theories. I should acknowledge it's Stephen Porges is a neuroscience who's behind it. I highly recommend his son, Seth Porges, has put out a sort of TED Talk kind of thing, but he's a comedian, so you can actually understand the theory. There's lots with Stephen Porges out there, but it's like over my head. Then Deb Dana, who I've mentioned, is a social worker who has applied this clinically. So she says, set an intention to look for a certain number of glimmers a day. And notice when you feel a spark of well-being or contentment. Look for glimmers in your daily activities. They happen regularly. They're micro moments, but if we're not setting an intention to look for them, we miss them.
I love that. That would be great for kids, right, Jane?
Mm-hmm.
Find
Any
10
age.
glimmers, any age, yeah.
Stop and appreciate those glimmers. And you might say to yourself, oh, there's a glimmer. You're acknowledging it, bringing attention. You may even link it to touching your heart or a sigh. So some kind of physical thing. And a sigh is sending it down the vagus nerve saying, it's okay. We're okay. So track them. Keep a list. Share them with somebody. Look for them in specific places. So if you are braving the grocery store, say, okay, at this grocery store, I'm going to find a glimmer. Maybe with particular people that don't always make you feel a glimmer. Mm-hmm. A relative you might have to check on that you don't want to, but say, okay, I'm going to find a glimmer in this conversation. And as Teresa, you say, it can be a family activity. How many glimmers can we find together? Another way of doing it people have done is they post a picture for the day. So anything that struck them, a pattern they saw in a fence, the sky, the clouds, a meal they made, and they take a picture. So post a picture and exchange that with a friend. And that's sort of what it is. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And it's my new favorite thing. Thank you, Jane.
Glimmer. Yeah, well, you're our glimmer today there, Jane. You have given us a whole lot of tips here. If you could sum it up for your daughters or your son-in-laws or your friends, for all of our listeners, getting through this time. In addition to what you've already said, is there anything else you could leave in the way of some little pearls of advice so that they can get through this challenge?
Make sure there's variety in your life. Check the story you're telling yourself. Notice the physical reactions. And notice if they are reminding you of something in the past that was also bad. And you can separate it because you don't need to magnify it. It's not the same. The context is different. And then say, what else is true?
Before we wrap up, Jane, how can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, I do have a website at newviewcounseling.com. And that's probably the best way. There's ways to connect.
We just all together got some great advice from you, Jane. And again, you're our glimmer. And I think those of us who are listening. And we're so pleased that you are so gracious and generous and sharing your wisdom with us, because I think there's a huge appetite for it out there.
Hi. We hope this podcast is a source of inspiration. If you're ready to dive deeper into these concepts and really apply them in your life, join us over at Master Life. You'll have a personalized experience and lots of support to create your own long, bright future. mymasterlife.com. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.